Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a few weeks. I've been using the iPad Pro every single day since the day I bought it. And to save everyone a bunch of time, I'm just gonna spoil the ending for you. I like it. I enjoy the iPad Pro. Once again, there is no big surprise. The Apple Sheep enjoys the newest Apple product. And if you were hoping for some type of analytical critique as to why the iPad Pro is Apple's biggest failure, or iOS just limits it so much, you're not gonna get it here. You can watch other YouTubers if you want to enjoy that. But if you'd just like to hear specifically why I enjoy the iPad Pro, please stay tuned as I will tell you all of the ways that I apply it to my daily life. So the first thing you'll notice when picking up the 2018 iPad Pro is how light and thin this thing is. In fact, I really encourage you guys to check it out at either a Best Buy or an Apple store somewhere, because this thing is honestly like scary light. You'll pick it up and be like, wow, that's it? It's shockingly impressive to me how thin they were able to get a tablet this size. While I know it may compromise on the bendness factor, as long as you treat your iPad with a general amount of respect, I don't think you're gonna have any problems. I've thrown this iPad Pro in suitcases and bags. I took it with me and my wife on our honeymoon, and it definitely got a lot of travel time, and I have not noticed any type of bending. So please just extinguish that critique from the get-go and understand that you have to put this thing under a certain amount of stress to get it to bend that is quite above the normal amount that an average user would give it. Now, moving on to the display itself. This is, I think, the most noticeable improvement that we have over the last generation. We've got thinner bezels all the way around, particularly if you're coming from a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. That's the version I have right now. Having one size bezel all the way around makes it such a more uniform, seamless experience than before that now, anytime I look at an older iPad Pro, whether it be the 10.5-inch or the 12.9-inch, it looks incredibly dated, and I also find it sort of limiting. See, in the old days, when we had Touch ID on our iPad Pros, that meant that when you opened it up to start the day, you had to unlock it with a certain fingerprint, and it had to press on that side of the display. There was no tap to wake, there was no face unlock like we have now, which in my opinion opens up the doors of unlocking the device to be so much more simple and so much easier to set up, because now anytime you open the iPad, you just tap the display with any finger. Doesn't have to be your thumb, doesn't have to be your pointer, it can be your pinky, it can be this hand, it can be whatever you want. Just tapping the display, it looks at your face and unlocks. From there, you can see your notifications and then swipe up to access your home screen. So in my opinion, this method is much faster, much more optimized for the speediness that we would like our devices to unlock to, and I'm genuinely excited at the advancements of Face ID in the iPad Pro, because I would love to see all of the angles and all of the omnidirectional support we got with Face ID's iPad Pro brought to the iPhones later. But yes, the iPad Pro has definitely revolutionized the Face ID feature, I think, showing all customers and people out there that Face ID is just in its very early developmental stages, and it's only going to get better as time goes on, and I think this is the first real giant advancement when it comes to this biometric technology, showing us, okay, Face ID works in a lot of situations, but now it works in any orientation, it works from much more angles, and as I said, really hope they can implement this type of face unlock into future gen iPhones, hopefully, some point in the future. So immediately from the get-go, unlocking it and using it is incredibly simple. The display is gorgeous, and I can't emphasize enough how much I am a fan of Team Buttery. You may notice on my channel, I'm a fan of 60 frames a second. It's because I think it's more lifelike, it's more closer to what the human eye sees. Now this is double that. So the video you're watching right now, if you're watching it above 720p, is likely at 60 frames a second. With the ProMotion display on the iPad Pro, you're at 120 hertz, which of course adjusts depending on what app you're using so that the battery is not wasted, which, having reviewed the Razer Phone 2 in the past, I think that's an important feature, given you can have 120 hertz display on products, but even though the Razer Phone 2 has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, the battery life on it is not the best. It's okay, it'll get you through the day, but let's just say I understand why Razer sets the display at 90 hertz by default, because 120 hertz on that Razer phone kills the battery quite quickly, where that is not the same situation with the iPad Pro. The battery easily lasts me several days depending on how much I use it. Obviously, if I use it more often, I may need to charge it at the end of the day, but easily I can get through my workday with my general use of the iPad Pro, which is primarily using it to manage social media apps across my Tailosive network. I'm currently testing a Tailosive app for the network on it right now, but we're not anywhere near completion of that. And if you want more information on the Tailosive app, please check out Tailosive Talks. We talk more about it over there. But the main work thing I use the iPad Pro for is editing video thumbnails. Every single one of the thumbnails you see across Tailosive Tech or Talks or Gaming was probably made using Over on the iPad Pro, which is a really excellent photo editing app. And using the Apple Pencil and its support of that allows me to mask out images that I want to use in my thumbnails very, very simply. And having such a large canvas to work with means that masking out little imperfections in my images and adding little drop shadows and editing text has never been easier before, thanks to the help of a stylus. And I do mean a legit actual stylus, not something that stuffs into the phone itself and feels hollow and it's made of plastic and it feels like you're holding a needle. And this feels like an actual pencil. I really appreciate all the changes they made with the Apple Pencil 2. It's now more of a matte finish. Of course, the docking method could not be easier. You simply magnetically attach it to the iPad Pro itself and it starts pairing and charging. And the other thing I really love about this docking method is that it works both ways. So you can flip the pencil around and it still docks and pairs simultaneously. I can't say that it's been completely reliable though. I talked about this during a couple live streams. First time I had the Apple Pencil 2, I used it for 5 days, it ran fine. And then during my honeymoon, it stopped working. It just didn't pair to the iPad anymore, which is absolutely ridiculous given this thing is $130. But I looked it up online, I couldn't find anyone else with the problem. So to this day, I'm not exactly sure if I got a defective unit or if this is a widespread problem for the Apple Pencil, but Apple was great about it. I literally just walked into an Apple store, which was 2 minutes from the place I was staying at. I handed them my old Apple Pencil and said, hey, this isn't working anymore. And they went, okay. And within 10 minutes gave me a brand new one, which is this one, and it's been working flawlessly so far. So I guess in all the people who have been testing Apple Pencils, that's like one of the first ones to fail. And the other thing I appreciate about Apple is the excellent customer service, the fact that I was able to solve this problem for free in under an hour, okay, during vacation. Apple stores are so widespread and so accessible to so many people. This is likely a reason so many people go with Apple, is because they know that if there is a problem, they can just go back to the store and probably someone's gonna help them out. I know that the bad Apple Store experiences make for more viral videos, but I also think it's worth mentioning that the good Apple Store experiences don't really get publicized because people just go about their day. They keep using the products. They don't go online and complain about how decent the customer service was. I also love being able to manage 2 apps at the same time, so I put lots of things on the display simultaneously, testing picture-in-picture, of course, while running Twitter and Discord and texting people. As someone who needs to be contacting a lot and being very active on social media, the iPad Pro is incredibly helpful for that. And also reading the news, checking up on things. This definitely covers that. But if you don't use that side of it so much and you want to talk more about the raw power you get with the A12X chip, it really is insane, bringing some record high Geekbench scores for particularly an iOS device. But I understand Geekbench scores are all meaningless unless you can actually optimize that hardware for something decent. So who cares that the A12X chip is super fast and it blows away the competition? Big deal. Why does that matter? Well, it means that in games like Fortnite, one of the most popular games in the world, you do have Fortnite Mobile on the iPad Pro and you're able to hit 60 frames a second on a resolution this size, that you're able to get frame rates and details during your gameplay that you're not going to get with any other tablet and probably any other Fortnite Mobile product. You can get 60 frames a second on the iPhone XR and XS as well, but playing that game with such a small display is quite tricky, and doing it with the iPad Pro I think gives you much more viewing area. And Apple does say that the iPad Pro has Xbox One S level graphics performance, which, as someone who's played Fortnite on the Xbox One S for quite some time and someone who's played Fortnite Mobile on the iPad Pro for a little while now, I can say I think that is a little bit of an exaggeration. The 60 FPS thing is definitely cool, and you do get 60 frames a second on an Xbox One S, but you do have to remember that on the Xbox One S, it's barely hitting 1080p while it's playing the gameplay. They have to turn down the resolution a little bit and lower the viewing distance of the game, whereas Fortnite Mobile on the iPad Pro definitely turns down the viewing distance more. But for the most part, the fact that it's running on a device with no fans, it's running on a device that's this incredibly light and thin with a battery life as good as this is, still I think the best way to play Fortnite Mobile. The Nintendo Switch cannot even hit 60 frames a second when it comes to Fortnite. Granted, I get it, those things are all cheaper, but this is mobile and it can do 10 million other things as well. Not to mention Fortnite Mobile on here doesn't cost money to play, whereas on things like the Xbox, you have to pay for Xbox Live. So regardless, you shouldn't buy this thing if your sole purpose is to play games on it, but this goes without saying. It runs Minecraft, of course, incredibly well. The best I've ever seen Pocket Edition running. And of course, if you want to pair it with a Bluetooth controller, you can get a fairly optimized little portable gaming experience. You can play it on this little mini TV here, while also having controller support. Sadly, both of these games, though, have a black bar that goes around the entire application. I don't know why developers have to do that, but luckily there's games like Alto's Odyssey, which do support the full resolution display, go all the way to every pixel that the iPad iPad Pro offers, and games look incredibly decent on there. I'm very thankful that they made the switch to USB-C on the iPad Pro because I'm one of those people that doesn't really complain about having to buy new cables and accessories. I'm a tech guy running a tech channel, which means I have a ton of cables all over the place, and a lot of the accessories I use are USB-C. So the fact that the iPad switched to USB-C means that it saves me from having to find another assortment of lightning cables. Now, all of my USB-C accessories suddenly work with my iPad, which has been marvelous. I didn't have to run out and buy new adapters because I already have USB-C adapters and dongles everywhere. So they immediately support this. Works out perfectly. The speakers on this thing get incredibly loud. It always blows me away how every single year Apple's able to make the speakers on the iPad Pro even more louder than before. And the cameras on this thing are definitely going to put you MacBook Air buyers in a more embarrassing point of view, because while you're spending extra to get that MacBook so that you can have external drive support, once you start making FaceTime calls or once you start using the camera on your MacBook Air, you're going to notice that this is a really crappy webcam, opposed to the fact that on the iPad Pro, the front-facing camera supports 1080p video at 60 frames a second. Also, if you care about taking pictures with an enormous viewfinder like you got on the iPad Pro, since it has the Face ID sensors on the front, you also have portrait mode. You can take portrait mode pictures with an iPad, which has never been done before. Not on the back for some reason, even though the iPhone XR can do it with one camera. They didn't add that software to the iPad Pro, but most of us are not iPad photographers. It's not a big deal. Though regardless, I think it should go without saying that this is the best camera you'll likely ever get on a tablet, given thanks to the A12X chip, you can record 4K at 60 FPS on the iPad Pro, which definitely you can notice and see when you record videos on this thing. For up-and-coming YouTubers who want a product to edit, shoot, write, and manage all of their social media on one device, I think the iPad Pro for younger YouTubers would be an excellent start. Very good video quality, very good frame rates. There's apps like LumaFusion and iMovie that are going to do an excellent job processing all of that data, rendering it all out. The Apple Pencil is also incredibly helpful during video editing processes, but for the sake of my work now, I don't use video editing apps on the iPad Pro, but I definitely recommend you guys check out John Morrison's channel, who edited an entire video using the iPad Pro and LumaFusion and utilizing the A12X chipset power, which is literally insane how much they're able to get out of a device that doesn't even have a fan in it. It's completely silent. Now, I understand that there are a ton of complaints out there for the iPad Pro. You want external file support, or people are upset about the headphone jack, or you want a file management system built into iOS. But essentially, what I've heard a lot of people complain about is things that would essentially just turn the iPad into what a MacBook already is. And I think a lot of people have said similar things to what I've said in the past, which is the iPad is not supposed to be exactly what a laptop is. It's not supposed to replace every single feature that your laptop has. It's supposed to be an alternative. Laptops can have their strengths, and if you want external drive support, you want a file management system, and you prefer a mouse and a keyboard, then that just means you want a laptop. I don't think that means that you need to buy a tablet and convert it into a laptop. What I love about the iPad compared to products like the Surface Go or the Surface Pro or things like the Pixel Slate is you buy these tablets, but you can tell when using the software and the way they advertise the product, they're expecting you to buy $200 worth of accessories in order to fully take advantage of all the software and all the optimization that's possible with the product. They don't want to optimize their apps to support a touch interface. They just want to slap a mouse on there so that they can just slide over their desktop apps onto the tablet. And while that does work and a lot of people out there like two-in-ones, I think at that point it's not a tablet anymore. Now you're just using a keyboard, a mouse, and you're separating your user interface from your display again. Whereas I think the gorgeous thing about iOS 12 and the iPad is that the user interface and the display have been combined. They're merged into one flat panel that works very, very smoothly. And I think the idea with the iPad is to take a different approach, an alternative method to getting your work done, not just trying to check every box that a laptop can do so that you can say, there, I don't have to buy a laptop anymore, but then you end up turning your iPad into a laptop in the process. So can the iPad Pro replace someone's computer? As I've talked about in the past, of course it can, depending on the person. Are there people out there that can't replace their MacBook or their iMac with an iPad Pro? Absolutely, I'm one of them. The iPad Pro is incredibly powerful. That does not mean that I have no use for my iMac Pro anymore, but I am not every person. For people out there that just manage their social media, need to do some light video editing, picture editing, and they don't want to spend as much on something like a MacBook, the iPad Pro is a perfect way to save some money, get some advantages like better cameras, better biometrics, higher refresh rates, buttery smooth displays, thinner bezels. You get some advantages with this thing, as well as taking some alternative methods to getting your work done. So yes, absolutely, depending on the person, it can be a laptop replacement, but look, it's not meant to be for everyone. For a lot of people out there though, it absolutely can. So in case you're curious, serious, I absolutely recommend the iPad Pro. It's an incredible device. I've been mostly disappointed with what Apple has done this year in terms of hardware, but this was no disappointment. This was exactly what I was hoping for, and I'm very, very satisfied with it, and I'm gonna keep using it every single day. Did you buy a new 2018 iPad Pro? Let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.